Story 1. I, female 24, recently found out who my daughter's, female 8, father is, and I don't know how to feel. I've known my husband, male 27, since I was 8 when he moved in across the street. He was like an older brother to my twin brother and me because we had no other siblings. My dad was gone a lot because he was a lineman. The only person I really had was my mom. I was kind of rebellious as a teen, and I'd sneak out all the time. At the time, I had never had a boyfriend because everybody was afraid of my brother. When I was 15, I snuck out and went to a party. I don't remember what happened that night, but I woke up in the back seat of my car, covered in a blanket and my jacket over my head. I was hurting and confused, but I continued with life regularly. A few months after, I went to the school nurse because I wasn't feeling well, and she gave me a pregnancy test, and I told her it was impossible because I didn't even have a boyfriend. The test was positive, and I cried because I didn't remember ever doing anything like that. They called my mom, and the nurse told me to tell my mom because she felt like she shouldn't be the one to tell her. I told my mom I was pregnant, but I've never done anything to have a baby. My mom took me to a doctor, and they told her I was too far along to abort. They told me how far I was along, and I told my mom about how I woke up in the back seat of my car that day. I had my daughter a few months later, and she looked exactly like me. My green and blue eye color, my blonde curly hair, and she even had my full lips. My now husband started to come over more after my daughter was born. He was so good with her, I started to see him as more than a friend. He bought her clothes, shoes, and toys, and he made sure she had everything she needed, even though he was a college student. When my daughter was around 3, we started to date. We dated for like 6 months before he asked me to marry him at his graduation party. We got married 4 months after that, and I got pregnant with our first son soon after. Everything was so perfect. But as my daughter grew, I noticed how much she started looking more like my husband. He always says she's his daughter, not stepdaughter. He'd get mad if somebody tried to correct him. I thought it was sweet that he was protecting her from not knowing who her father was. I recently did a DNA test to see if my gut was right. It turns out my husband is my daughter's father. I don't know what to do. I don't even know what happened. If I ask him if he remembers, how will he react? He has always been so loving and caring. He told me I was his dream girl, and he'd give me the entire world if he could. It's been a week since I got the results, and I haven't said anything. My life is so perfect that I don't even want to ask about it. This is serious. I mean, everything is good so far, but when things are down, you never know what's going to change. This is something that's going to bother you, even if everything else in your life is perfect. I think it needs to come out in the open. This needs to be discussed. You want everything out in the open. Your husband may have previously violated you, and that needs to be addressed. I really think it does. And it's going to be hard to do with your life so perfect, but kind of better now when things are at their best rather than it being another pile of smeg piled onto when things are at their worst. Story 2. Karen called the cops on my service dog and accused me of being too young to be disabled again. So I saw Karen with her child again, but this time in Walmart while I was grocery shopping. I made the mistake of ignoring my dog when she was alerting me to my heart rate. I genuinely thought she wanted the sandwich I was eating. Boy, was I ever wrong. I ended up really dizzy and out of breath and had to sit down in the corner of the store while she was doing deep pressure therapy. I must have been on the floor for about 10 minutes. During that time, a staff member at Walmart came over to check on me and ask if I was all right. They gave me a free bottle of water as well, and I'm very appreciative of that. Anyways, while I was down, The same child saw me again from a distance and had another meltdown. The child's mom already explained to me last time that her daughter had autism. She was screaming and crying about my dog being there because she was terrified. I can understand why she may be scared because my dog is by no means small. She's a 115-pound female cane corso. Aside from alert and response, she's also trained for mobility assistance. Her breed isn't typically used as a service dog, but she was a natural. I got her as a pet dog, and she became the service dog I needed. She's a 100% good girl. This woman did not leave the store with her child that was having a meltdown. Instead, she had the audacity to call 911 on me. Eventually, the cops did show up, and she kept shouting that I was faking having a disability because I was too young to actually be disabled again, that it was illegal for me to have my service dog anywhere near food indoors, and that people like me are the reason why she has to suffer lockdowns. I'm Asian. She said the least I could do is be considerate and stay home away from everyone and keep my dog at home where it belongs. My dog was very clearly vested with tags that said service dog. I showed the cops my medical note that I carry stating that I require a service dog. In the end, the manager banned the woman from coming to the local Walmart for a year. The cops only gave her a warning for wasting their time and escorted her off the property. There are people that genuinely need help. There are genuinely people that really need special consideration. There are always going to be those people. There's those people, and then there are people that play the victim. I realize that this girl had a meltdown. I have no doubt that this child was autistic and had a fear of dogs. But you take your child out of the situation. You wait and then you finish your shopping. It's unfortunate. You have to make room for each other. You have to respect. I don't know why this is so hard to understand. I'm a victim, so I'm first. It's the weird mentality. Weird. Story 3. So you like to throw stones at passing cyclists? Prepare for the fright of your young life. This happened around 2010. I was cycling around Haringey Green Lanes where I lived at the time. The area is gentrified now, but at the time it was considered to be a bit rough by London standards. Those familiar with the area know that there are narrow alleyways that connect up all the side roads, off of Green Lanes. So I'm cycling past one of these alleyways and see a group of rowdy kids messing around inside the alley. There are 4 of them, aged maybe 11 or 12, and making a lot of noise, as kids do. As I pass them, they go all quiet. Sensing that something is up, I shoot them a look over my shoulder and catch one of them throwing a stone at me, which bounces off my back. This is followed by an explosion of laughter and jeering. Now, I remember being a kid and the lengths that kids go to entertain their friends. To be honest, I wasn't even that mad. But in that moment, I decided to make this a teachable moment for the little mongrel and to make sure that he will never forget me. So I pretend to lose my mind. I toss my bike to the road, turn and sprint at them full speed to quickly cover the 10 to 15 meters between us. At the same time, I scream in a pretend rage and wind my arm back like I'm about to deliver a WWE haymaker and end a young life or two. They barely have the time to register what's going on. 3 of them scatter like cockroaches, but the one who threw the stone freezes in his tracks. He kind of just collapses against a wall with his arms outstretched, babbling and begging for mercy. I put my face right next to his and whisper, "I'm only joking, kid." The kid blinks for a second, then promptly starts to wail loudly, like he's carrying the burden of the world on his little shoulders. I walked away feeling like I had done the world a small service. What are your thoughts? Was this justified or too much? You didn't actually commit child abuse. You kind of scared the kid. I mean, the kid threw a stone at you. That could have hurt you. and it kind of didn't. They thought they were being harmless. You kind of responded in kind. You did make it a teachable moment. You don't know who you're messing with. This kid might have been throwing a stone at a guy who doesn't mind dealing with kids in a more violent manner. So, yeah, I don't think it was unwarranted. That's what I meant to say. Story 4. The doctor I worked for paid hundreds of dollars to eat dinner leftovers. I worked for an orthopedic surgeon who constantly ate people's lunches and would leave $10 on the fridge. He really loved leftover home-cooked meals. "I don't get lunch off. I have to work to keep paying your salary. You can go buy another lunch," he would say. I hated him so much, but I got paid a lot. He was fresh out of his internship and residency, and he thought he was above everyone else. We complained to the office manager. She went to the doctor and said we were all ticked about it. The doctor told her to deal with it. If the doctor decided to eat one of our lunches, we could have the office manager just order us something. This was amazing. There were 2 people besides me that had family and kids, so we always brought leftovers. If he ate my food, I ordered from the most expensive steak place in town. Appetizers, 22-ounce steak, 3 sides, a salad, and dessert. I'd eat the salad, and the rest went home. And, of course, there were plenty of leftovers to take to work the next day. The rest of the staff was doing the same, ordering full chickens, 4 to 5 different Chinese dishes, spending hundreds of dollars to replace stolen meatloaf sandwiches and day-old soups and spaghetti. The office manager went along with it. After all, he said we could order what we wanted if he took our lunch. It went on for 2 months until Penis Head Doc caught on. From then on, he had the office manager order him lunch. I do miss trading off a cold pork chop and Spanish rice for prime rib and all the fixings. If he felt that way, why didn't he just cater something that was within a better price range? This guy might have been a good, doctor of whatever he is outside of his residency, but he's bad at budgeting his money. Right. Just have him order stuff for everybody to keep them happy. Apparently, he just felt like all that mattered was him. That's awful. You shouldn't have to take someone's lunch just because they work for you. That's kind of borderline slavery, almost.
Please like and subscribe if you made it this far. I hope you'll enjoy the rest of the video and have a wonderful day.
Story 5. I made my high school chemistry teacher lose his job. I went to a ghetto high school in a poor community, but my parents raised me to work my butt off so I could get out of there. My parents never went to college, but because of this, myself and my siblings have all gone to good schools out of state. I maintained a 4.0 until the year in question in high school, taking 5 advanced courses a year, out of 6 total, with the last 6 not offering an honors alternative. I learned to get very little sleep because of the amount of work these courses required, and because my school didn't have tutoring aids or anything of the like. Didn't understand something? Tough smeg. Get to Googling. So in one of my upperclassmen years, I signed up for an advanced chemistry course. I knew it would be hard, but assumed, like the rest of my courses, that if the class was minimally structured and Google came through per usual, I'd be fine. Other students warned me not to take the course, but since I wanted to go to college for chemistry, I knew I had to go through with it. The teacher was horrible. He was old, which is fine, and didn't offer after-class support, which was normal, but also didn't even offer in-class support. His answer to even basic questions was, "You should understand that. Talk to me about it later." But later never came. He didn't offer lunch hours, didn't offer after-school hours, and in class would just put up the answers, which were already available online and in the back of the book. My family didn't have fancy tutor money, and none was readily available in my community anyways. I studied my butt off, but when the first test came back, I had a D-, with no notes to even understand what I had done wrong. When I went to speak with him about it right after class ended, missing part of my next course in the process, he simply told me to look more closely at the textbook for help, and that he didn't have the time for me. He was 2 weeks behind the explanations that he did give because he was constantly distracted. All of this is bad, but didn't deserve him being fired yet. What did was he got dangerous. In an experiment working with hydrochloric acid, a plug held the concentrated stuff in a tube with some magnesium and reacted to form hydrogen bubbles. Well, one of the other students in my group didn't plug the thing properly and the plug fell out, with the Mg being stuck in the tube, now without the HCl. So I asked him how to get the tube back, expecting him to tell us to discard the HCl solution, rinse with water, and start over. I'd read the safety section in my textbook, which had this approach to working with acids. His response? He insisted that I stick my ungloved hand in the solution and just grab the plug, and then, still in the solution, plug it back in. He wouldn't even put his own hand in to do it, so my high school self thought this was an inherently bad idea. I took some more Mg from the workbench and kept adding it to the solution until it stopped reacting, eating up all the HCl to just leave water. And it kept getting worse. One day he brought what he claimed were illegal fireworks into the classroom and started setting them off. He thought it was funny to point them at us, wearing no safety equipment or goggles and hoodies that could have easily caught the fiery things. I frequently would leave the room while a group of high school kids were playing with Bunsen burners and caustic chemicals. So in combination with the total lack of education I was getting, I didn't feel safe. Did I mention he was sexist too? I'm a girl, by the way. All the boys got A's on tests, with no explanations. He even lost one of the other boys' tests and straight up said in front of me and the rest of the class that we would just give him an A-, assuming that he had done well. Later on, I had asked the other student for help understanding something, and even he didn't know what was going on in the course, so I knew it was just hogwash. Every other girl I asked was getting the same inexplicable grades I was. This wasn't unusual on its own either, as I lived in a very conservative area and had several sexist teachers. Just usually they'd at least still grade fairly. Last contextual thing. My high school teachers' union had negotiated for tenure. After coming to college, I've learned that this is a very unusual thing, and in retrospect, it's an idiotic thing. This chemistry teacher was tenured, which meant that there was basically no way to fire him. Honestly, I felt bad for the bitter old man because after a botched surgery, he was constantly in pain. He was still teaching because he refused to retire, and he had a son going through college that he needed to pay for. But at a certain point, this was affecting my chances of getting into college. I wasn't about to let one man's issues affect prospects for the rest of my life. So I looked up recording laws for my state and found that it was a one-party consent state, meaning that I could legally record my teacher audio as long as the campus didn't say anything against it. They had no policies. And I was one of the parties consenting. So for a month, with my grades tanking despite hours of studying and 3 study books on the course, I recorded him. I recorded his fireworks, his lambasting female students, his crying in the back chemical storage room, leaving us unsupervised. I recorded the 3 times he had left campus inexplicably, leaving the front office to send a last-minute substitute to open the door and let us in. You know, the 15 minutes and I'm legally allowed to leave meme? That was a constant joke for my class. And then I made a throwaway Gmail to make a throwaway Dropbox account, big at the time. I uploaded everything and emailed it to my superintendent with the ultimatum that if something wasn't done, I would email the recordings to the local news, and that I really didn't want to do that. Within a day, I heard back, with her assuring me that I wouldn't be punished for ratting him out. My parents, her, and myself met. We went over my grades, my unmarked tests and homework, and the videos. They asked me first to talk over my concerns with the teacher, and I said I was uncomfortable with that given his treatment of female students. The superintendent said she wouldn't tell the teacher who had submitted the evidence, but that they needed to speak with him about the concerns to hear his side of the story. My parents and I said that was completely reasonable, as long as my name was never mentioned. The next day, the teacher said he needed to speak with me after class alone. I told him I couldn't, as I had another course after that, and he said that it was important. I turned my phone's recorder on right before the class ended, and I was packing up, and he approached me. Due to the shape of the classroom, I was literally backed into a corner and would have had to push this man to the side to get out. He then started saying that one of the students in the course had brought unfounded concerns and lies to the administration about what was going on in the course, and that he knew we hadn't always gotten along very well, but that he hoped I wouldn't have done that to him. I lied through my teeth and said that I didn't know what he was talking about, that he was making me uncomfortable by blocking my access to the door, and that I was late for my next class. He didn't even deny what I was saying, just said that since I clearly had a problem with him, he'd be willing to stay after class to help me specifically since it seemed like I was struggling so much. After that, I told him I really needed to get to my next course, and he finally moved. I emailed the superintendent that recording during my next course and CC'd my parents. My parents were furious. The superintendent was mad too because while my parents were poor, they dressed up nicely. My mom was an expert in bluffing about getting a lawyer that we totally couldn't afford, so a liability lawsuit was probably ringing through the lady's mind. Since the district couldn't fire him, he was put on immediate, permanent medical leave. While the district was still paying his full pay, they gave us one unqualified substitute after another. 2 months before the national exam for the course, they gave us a female teacher that they had pulled out of retirement, but that had actually taught the advanced chemistry course for years. She was a godsend, and even held 8-hour Saturday classes so that we could catch up with the curriculum at least enough to pass the class. In those 2 months, we covered just enough of the test material that our class had a 50% pass rate. According to my upperclassmen friends, this was a lot higher than it had been for their years, with less than 10% of the class passing. The superintendent also wrote me a thank you college recommendation letter, partially to keep me quiet, and partially because they had been trying to get rid of this guy for years. My little sister took this course a couple of years after me and said that the new teacher was competent, and they were still at that 50% pass rate. Also, mods, if you don't believe me, I can send you proof. I still have some of the recordings, and one of them ends with another kid just going, "I still don't understand any of this." Wow, I'm finishing up at a good college now, so I've got absolutely no regrets. Unfortunately, everything seems to be recorded nowadays, and unfortunately, everything seems to have to be recorded because of things like this. I can understand high school teachers wanting some kind of assurances, wanting some kind of security in their jobs. If it weren't for high school teachers like this, they'd probably get it.
Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.